All right, so this is going to be another movie review. This one's called Death Wish 1974. Giving it 5 out of 5 stars. I love this flick. Vigilante city style, judge, jury, and executioner. Charles Bronson, Michael Winner, Death Wish, rated R, in Technicolor, Paramount Picture, Dino De Laurentiis. All right. Cool looking movie poster. Pretty decent. Not bad. This one's got a brutal rape scene, and you get to see Charles Bronson's daughter some TNA and her big doorknob sized pink nipples. That was a highlight right there. With Jeff Goldblum doing the little Clockwork Orange action on Charles Bronson's daughter. Don't mess with Murphy. I mean, Charles Bronson. Death Wish is a 1974 U.S. vigilante action film directed by Michael Winner. Of course, Charles Bronson preferred to work with J. Lee Thompson because Michael Winner did 3 takes and J. Lee Thompson only did 2 takes. So Michael Winner made him work harder for his money. At advanced stage, I'm guessing that he's in his late 40s or early 50s in this one. The film loosely based on the 1972 novel of the same title by Brian Garfield and the first film in the Death Wish film series. I still agree with Karate Man that number 4 is the best. It stars Charles Bronson as Paul Kersey alongside Hope Lange, Vincent Gardenia, William Redfield, Kathleen Tolan, and Christopher Guest. I forgot to put Christopher Guest on here. Christopher Guest. Was in Little Shop of Horrors. I don't know. Maybe I won't put his name in there. Anyways, the name looked familiar, but I can't recognize any of his other movie titles. In the film, Paul Kersey, an architect leading a peaceful life, resorts to vigilantism after his wife was murdered and daughter raped during a home invasion. All right. So what happened was his wife wanted their groceries to be delivered in these punks led by Jeff Goldblum. They get the address and they go to make a grocery delivery, but it's a rape of Charles Bronson's daughter and the killing of his wife. At the time of release, Death Wish was criticized for its apparent support of vigilantism and advocating unlimited punishment of criminals. The novel allegedly denounced vigilantism, whereas the film embraced the notion. The film was a commercial success and resonated with the public in the United States, which was experiencing increasing crime rates during the 1970s. All right. Charles Bronson takes the law into his own hands. You can't depend on the Keystone Cops to protect his family, so why not form self-defense? Why not defend yourself with a gun? It makes perfect sense to me. The police aren't going to defend you. Your only choice is to defend yourself with a gun. Anyways, I wonder why more women don't defend themselves with a gun in movies. But here we go. Produced by Dino De Laurentiis. Distributed, production company, Dino De Laurentiis Corporation. I forgot to mention that the director, Michael Winner, was also co-producer. I better put his name twice before I get into trouble here. Paul Kersey is a middle-aged architect who lives in Manhattan with his wife, Joanna, and their adult daughter, Carol. Carol is hot. That rape scene is the reason to watch this. We like Carol on this channel. Plus, it's got the wah-wah pedal. It's got the Keystone Cops going after the vigilante. Then eventually they want to encourage him to move to Chicago. Paul Kersey is middle-aged. One day, Joanna and Carol are followed home from the grocery stores by three muggers. The trio invade the Kersey apartment by posing as delivery men. Discovering that the women only have $7 on them, the goons severely beat Joanna and sexually assault Carol before fleeing. They rip off her shirt and a bra, so you get to see her large pink areola. And then they pull down her pants, so you get to see her bum sprayed with red spray paint. That was kind of interesting. I don't know what that was all about. At the hospital, Joanna dies from her injuries. At her funeral, Paul has an encounter with a mugger, and he fights back with a homemade weapon, causing the mugger to run away. Paul is left shaken and energized by the encounter. He's using a sock full of 2 rolls of quarters to beat on the mugger. A few days later, Paul's boss sends him to Tucson, Arizona to work with real estate developer Ames Jane Chill, a client with a residential development project. Let's see. Distributed by Paramount Pictures. Release date July 24th, 1974. Running time a cool 94 minutes. Country United States, language English. Budget $3.7 million. Box office $30 million in the US and West Germany. $20.3 million worldwide rentals. That is a huge profit on this movie. This movie was a tremendous success. Unreal. Paul is eventually invited to dinner by Ames at his gun club. Ames is impressed with Paul's pistol marksmanship at the target range. It should be noted that Paul is a conscientious objector from the Korean War, and yet living in New York City still turns him into a bloodthirsty killer vigilante dude. That's the only way to survive in New York City in 1974. Like I said, the police aren't going to protect you. You have to depend on self-defense with a gun. It's very simple. Paul reveals he was a conscientious objector during the Korean War when he served as a combat medic, and that he had been taught to handle firearms by his hunter father. But after the senior Kersey was mortally wounded by a second hunter who mistook Paul's father for a deer, Paul's mother made him swear never to use guns again. That was a good mother. Paul helps Ames plan his residential housing development. After a couple of weeks, Ames drives Paul back to Tucson Airport, places a gift as a thank you for his work on the project into Paul's checked luggage. This was back in the days where you could pack a gun on an airplane and nobody cared. In Manhattan, Paul learns that Carol's mind has snapped due to the trauma she suffered and her mother's death. Carol is now catatonic and an elective mute, refusing to speak to her husband Jack. With Paul's blessing, Jack commits Carol to a mental rehabilitation institute. At home, Paul opens Ames' gift to discover that it is a Colt .32 caliber revolver with a box of ammunition and cleaning kit. How did he get that through the metal detector? He loads the gun, takes a late night walk, and he is mugged at gunpoint. But Paul fatally shoots the mugger. And it's like this for the rest of the movie, killing several muggers by luring them into over the next. Oh, okay. At first, he's shocked, so he then runs home and he vomits in the toilet. I guess he's still a conscientious objector, and he's offended that he killed somebody. He should go to confession, but no. Over the next several weeks, Paul walks through the city looking for criminals, killing several muggers by luring them into a confrontation by presenting himself as an affluent victim, or when he sees them attacking innocent people. NYPD Inspector Frank Ochoa investigates the vigilante killings. His department narrows it down to a list of men, 14, I think, who have had a family member recently killed by muggers and or are war veterans. Paul then visits Carol at the Institute, where she remains generally depressed and unable to speak to Jack or show him any affection. Bummer. Poor Jack's wife is like a vegetable. She has physically assaulted the psychiatrist out of stress and is being tied to her bed with belts and ropes. I missed that part. Ochoa soon suspects Paul and is about to make an arrest when the district attorney intervenes, and the district attorney says that we don't want him arrested. The district attorney and the police commissioner do not want the statistics to get out that Paul's vigilantism has led to a dramatic decrease in street crime. They fear that if said information becomes public knowledge, the city will descend into vigilante chaos. You've already got vigilantes popping up all over the place on the news, on the television. If Paul is arrested, he can be labeled a martyr and people will copy his example. Ochoa reluctantly relents and he opts for scaring him off. Instead, one night, Paul shoots two more muggers before being wounded in the leg. By a third, he pursues the mugger and he corners him at the warehouse where he proposes a fast draw contest, only to faint because of blood loss while the mugger escapes. I'm surprised the mugger didn't just go up to him and shoot him in the head. A patrolman discovers Paul's gun and he hands it to Ochoa, who orders him to forget that he found it. At a local hospital, Ochoa visits Paul, who is recovering. Ochoa offers to surreptitiously dispose of the revolver in the Hudson River in exchange for Paul's permanent exile from New York City. Paul takes the deal, and his company agrees to transfer him to Chicago. Ochoa tells the press that Paul is an ordinary mugging victim and that the vigilante is still out there. Paul arrives in Chicago Union Station by train. Being greeted by a company representative, he notices hoodlums harassing a young woman. He excuses himself and he helps her. And I don't want to spoil the ending, but you get the drift. There's a lot of actors in this. John Hertzfeld played the greaser who slashes Paul Kersey's newspaper, while Robert Milano had a minor role as a mugger in the film. Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs, who later co-starred on the television show Welcome Back, Kotter, had an uncredited role as one of the Central Park muggers near the end of the film. It has been rumored that Denzel Washington made his screen debut as an uncredited alley mugger, since in the long shot the actor shown appears to resemble him, but Washington stated that not to be true. I better take out his name then from the movie credits. If the man himself said he wasn't in this movie, I'll take him out. We will not be tagging Denzel Washington or mentioning his name in the description. Actress Helen Martin, who had a minor role as a mugging victim who fights off her attackers with a hat pin, subsequently appeared in the television sitcoms Good Times and 227. Christopher Guest made one of his earliest film appearances as a young police officer who finds Kersey's gun. Marcia Jean Kurtz, who played the receptionist at Paul's office, has appeared in multiple roles on the TV series Law and Order. Sonia Manzano, who played Maria on Sesame Street, had an uncredited role as a supermarket checkout clerk. All right, we'll take out Denzel Washington and we'll put Sonia Manzano from Sesame Street in the description and the tags. Sonia Manzano. It's got the cool wah-wah guitar, the inept police force that is so corrupt, all they care about is low crime statistics. The film marked Jeff Goldblum's screen debut, playing one of the freaks who assaults Kersey's family early in the film. The producers of Death Wish were Hal Landers and Bobby Roberts. Bobby Roberts was also the manager of the rock group Steppenwolf at the time. Apparently, Jeff Goldblum struck up a friendship with Steppenwolf keyboardist Goldie McJohn, because Goldie once said Jeff Goldblum was his cigarette mooching pal. The film was based on Brian Garfield's 1972 novel of the same name. Garfield was inspired to use the theme of vigilantism following incidents in his personal life. In one incident, his wife's purse was stolen. In another, his car was vandalized. His initial thought each time was that he would kill this SOB responsible. He later considered that these were primitive thoughts contemplated in an unguarded moment. He then thought of writing a novel about a man who entered that way of thinking in a mode of rage and then never emerged from it. The original novel received favorable reviews, but it was not a bestseller. Garfield sold screen rights to both Death Wish and Relentless to the only film producers who approached him, Hal Landers and Bobby Roberts. He was offered the chance to write a screenplay adapting one of the two novels and chose Relentless. He simply considered it the easier of the two to turn into film. Wendell Mays was then hired to write the screenplay for Death Wish. He preserved the basic structure of the novel and much of the philosophical dialogue. It was his idea to turn police detective Frank Ochoa into a major character of the film. His early drafts for the screenplay had different endings from the final one. In one, he followed an idea from Garfield. The vigilante confronts the three thugs who attacked his family, and the vigilante ends up dead at their hands. Ochoa discovers the dead man's weapon and considers following in his footsteps. In another, the vigilante is wounded and rushed to a hospital. His fate is left ambiguous. Meanwhile, Ochoa has found the weapon, and Ochoa struggles with the decision to use it. His decision is left unclear. I wonder why Charles Bronson did not catch up to the freaks. He's only catching up to people attacking him, not the people who attacked his family. I guess they could never find those three freaks, including but not limited to Jeff Goldblum in his screen debut. Originally, Sidney Lumet was to have directed Jack Lemmon and Paul and Henry Fonda as Ochoa. Lerner bowed out of the project to direct Serpico, 1973, requiring a search for another director. Several were considered, including Peter Medek, who wanted Henry Fonda as Paul. United Artists eventually chose Michael Winner due to his track record of gritty, violent action films. The examples of his work considered included The Mechanic, Scorpio, and The Stone Killer. So now I got to look for Relentless, The Mechanic, Scorpio, and The Stone Killer. I probably already have The Mechanic on my list somewhere. The film was rejected by other studios because of its controversial subject matter and the perceived difficulty of casting someone in the vigilante role. Several actors were considered, including Steve McQueen, Clint Eastwood, Burt Lancaster, George C. Scott, Frank Sinatra, Lee Marvin, and even Elvis Presley. Winter attempted to recruit Bronson, but there were two problems for the actor. One was that his agent, Paul Kohner, considered that the film carried a dangerous message. The other was that the screenplay followed the original novel in describing the vigilante as a meek accountant, hardly a suitable role for Bronson. I was really a miscast person, Bronson said later. It was more a theme that would have been better for Dustin Hoffman or somebody who could play a weaker kind of man. I told them that at the time. Weiner was anxious about his decision to cast Jill Ireland, Bronson's real life wife, for the role of Paul Kersey's wife, Joanna Kersey. After Weiner told this to Bronson, he said, "No, I don't want her humiliated and messed around by these actors who play muggers. You know the sort of person we want, someone who looks like Hope Lange." To which Winter replied, "Well, Charlie, the person who looks most like Hope Lange is Hope Lange, so I'll get her." Ireland later played Kersey's love interest in Death Wish 2. The film project was dropped by United Artists after budget constraints forced producers Hal Landers and Bobby Roberts to liquidate their rights. The original producers were replaced by Italian film mogul Dino De Laurentiis. De Laurentiis convinced Charles Bloodham to bring the project to Paramount Pictures. Paramount purchased the distribution rights of the film in the United States market, while Columbia Pictures licensed the distribution rights for the international markets. However, Paramount also distributed the film in the UK through Cinema International Corporation. 20th Century Fox distributed the film in Spain. De Laurentiis raised the $3 million budget of the film by pre-selling the distribution rights. With funding secured, screenwriter Gerard Wilson was hired to revise the script. His first task was changing the identity of the vigilante to make the role more suitable for Bronson. Paul Benjamin was renamed Paul Kersey. His job was changed from accountant to architect. His background changed from World War II veteran to a Korean War veteran. The reason for him not seeing combat duty changed from serving as an army accountant to being a conscientious objector. Several vignettes from May's script were deemed unnecessary and so were deleted. Weiner asked for several revisions in the script. Both the novel and the original script had no scenes showing the vigilante interacting with his wife. Weiner decided to include a prologue depicting a happy relationship, and so the prologue of the film depicts the couple vacationing in Hawaii. The early draft of the script had the vigilante being inspired by seeing a fight scene in the Western film High Noon. Weiner decided a more elaborate scene involving a fight scene in a recreation of the Wild West taking place in Tucson, Arizona. The final script had the vigilante making an occasion reference to Westerns. While confronting an armed mugger, he challenges him to a draw. Kersey tells him to fill your hand, the same challenge issued by Western movie icon John Wayne to his main opponent in the climactic shootout in 1969's True Grit. When Ochoa tells him to get out of town, he asks if he has until sundown to do so. The killing in the subway station was supposed to remain off-screen in May's script, but Weiner decided to turn this into an actual brutal scene. A minor argument occurred when it came to shooting location for the film. Bronson asked for a California-based location so that he could visit his family in Bel Air, Los Angeles. Wiener insisted on New York City, and De Laurentiis agreed. Ultimately, Bronson backed down. Death Wish was shot on location in New York City from January 14th, 1974 to mid-April 1974. Death Wish was first released to U.S. audiences in July 1974. The world premiere took place on July 24th in the Loews Theater in New York City. Multiple Grammy Award jazz musician Herbie Hancock. I forgot to put his name. Music by Herbie Hancock. I was wondering why the background music was so good. I'll give Herbie Hancock credit for that. This is a very dark, bleak view on on human nature in 1970s New York City. Multiple Grammy award winning jazz musician Herbie Hancock produced and composed the original score for the soundtrack to the movie. It was his third film score after the 1966 movie Blow Up and The Spook Who Sat by the Door, 1973. Michael Wiener said, Dino De Laurentiis said, get a cheap English band because the English bands were very successful. But I had a girlfriend who was in Sesame Street, a Puerto Rican actress by the name of Sonia Manzano, who played a checkout girl at the supermarket in Death Wish. And she was a great jazz fan. She said, well, you should have Herbie Hancock. He's got this record out called Headhunters. She gave me Headhunters, which was staggering. And I said, Dino, never mind a cheap English band. We'll have Herbie Hancock, which we did. Hancock's theme for the film was quoted in Judge, Jury, and Executioner, a 2013 single by Atoms for Peace. The film was released on VHS, Betamax, and Laserdisc in 1980. It was later released on DVD in 2001 and 2006. A 40th anniversary edition was released on Blu-ray in 2014. Death Wish received mixed reviews from critics upon its release. Many critics were displeased with the film, considering it an immoral threat to society and encouragement of antisocial behavior. Vincent Canby of the New York Times was one of the most outspoken writers, condemning Death Wish in 2 extensive articles. Roger Ebert awarded 3 stars out of 4 and praised the cool precision of Wiener's direction, but did not agree with the film's philosophy. Gene Siskel gave the film 2 stars out of 4 and wrote that its setup makes no attempt at credibility. Its goal is to prevent a syllogism that argues for vengeance and to present it so swiftly that one doesn't have time to consider its absurdity. Charles Chaplin of the Los Angeles Times called it a despicable motion picture. It is nasty and demagogic stuff and appealed to brute emotions and against reason. Gary Arnold of the Washington Post described the film as simplistic to the point of stasis. Scarcely a single sensible insight into urban violence occurs. The killings just plod along one after another as Bronson stalks New York's crime-ridden streets. Clyde Jeavons of the Monthly Film Bulletin wrote, superficially, it's not all that far removed from a boat teacher revenge western. The difference, of course, is that Michael Wiener has none of boat teacher's indigenous sense of allegory or his instinct for what constitutes a good folk mythology, let alone his relish for three-dimensional villains. Garfield was also unhappy with the final product, calling the film incendiary, and stated the film's sequels are all pointless and rancid since they advocate vigilantism, unlike his two novels, which make the opposite argument. The film led him to write a follow up titled Death Sentence, which was published a year after the film's release. Bronson defended the film, and Bronson felt that it was intended to be a commentary on violence and was meant to attack violence, not romanticize it. I thought it was more of a self-defense movie, but Bronson does go out of his way to put himself in dangerous situations. So it's almost like he's inviting people to attack him. On Rotten Tomatoes, Death Wish has an approval rating of 66% fresh, based on reviews from 32 critics. Not bad. The website's critics' consensus reads Death Wish is undeniably exploitation fare and also undeniably effective. The film grossed $22 million in the United States and Canada, generating theatrical rentals of $8.8 million. In West Germany, grossed over $7.6 million. It earned theatrical rentals of $20.3 million worldwide. The film is recognized by America Film Institute in these lists. 2001, AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills, nominated. 2003, AFI's 100 Years, 100 Heroes and Villains, Paul Kersey, nominated hero. Death Wish was a watershed for Bronson, who was 52 years of age at the time, and who was then better known in Europe and Asia for his role in The Great Escape. Bronson became a U.S. film icon who experienced great popularity over the next 20 years. In the series' later years, the Death Wish franchise became a subject of parody for its high level of violence and the advancing age of Bronson. A 1995 episode of The Simpsons, A Star is Burns, showed a fictional advertisement for Death Wish 9 consisting of a bedridden Bronson saying, "I wish I was dead." However, the Death Wish franchise remained lucrative, and it drew support from fans of exploitation cinema. We like exploitation cinema on this channel. The series continues to have a widespread following on home video and is occasionally broadcast on various television stations in the US and Europe. In 2019, during the 74th season of the United Nations General Assembly, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan referred to Death Wish while explaining the possibility of radicalization of Kashmiri youth as a result of Indian revocation of Jammu and Kashmir's special status, part of the Kashmir conflict. In March 2016, Paramount and MGM announced that Aaron Keshalis and Navat Papushado would direct a remake starring Bruce Willis. Now, this I've got to see. I've seen the series, but I have not seen the remake. In May, Keshalis and Papushado quit the project after the studio failed to allow their script rewrites. In June, Eli Roth signed on to direct. The film was released on March 2nd, 2018. Now, the question is, did Bruce Willis have dementia during this movie? Probably not. The 2007 movie, The Brave One, starring Jodie Foster, Terrence Howard, and Mary Steenburgen, and directed by Neil Jordan, was a loose remake of Death Wish. Foster played a female version of Paul Kersey named Erica Bain, a radio host whose fiancé is murdered in front of her muggers by muggers in Central Park. The film was released on September 14th, 2007. Foster was nominated for a Golden Globe for her performance. So we'll check out Jodie Foster, the lesbian in The Brave One. We'll check out the Death Wish remake with Bruce Willis. We'll check up on those other 4 movies that I mentioned. And we'll get our list updated here. But first, let's go to IMDb, see what's happening over here. Went through Wikipedia, now we'll do IMDb. Death Wish 1974, 1 hour 33 minutes. It's a fairly high 6.9 out of 10 on IMDb, 46,000 ratings. In terms of popularity, it's at 4,966, up 102. So it's barely at the bottom of the popularity list, but it's creeping its way up slowly. A New York City architect becomes a one-man vigilante squad after his wife is murdered by street punks. In self-defense, the vengeful man kills muggers on the mean streets after dark. So this is a lamestream movie, very popular, 46,000 ratings, and it's on the popularity meter. More like this: Death Wish 2, Death Wish 3, Death Wish 4, The Crackdown, which is the greatest Death Wish of them all, and Death Wish, The Face of Death. I don't even know what that is. Is that Death Wish 5? I may have seen that. I do not know. I'm going to have to look that up. Death Wish, The Face of Death. After finishing Stone Killer 1973, Charles Bronson and Michael Weiner wanted to make another film together, and they were discussing further projects. What do we do next? Asked Bronson. The best script I've got is Death Wish. It's about a man whose wife and daughter are mugged, and he goes out and shoots muggers, said Weiner. I'd like to do that, Bronson said. The film, asked Weiner. Bronson replied, no, shoot muggers. Kersey's first shooting victim is hit in the abdomen, but a police investigator at the crime scene the next morning refers to a bullet hole in his chest. Here's some quotes from Paul Kersey and Jack Toby. Paul Kersey, nothing to do but cut and run, huh? What else? What about the old American social custom of self-defense? If the police don't defend us, maybe we ought to do it ourselves. Well, that's a novel concept. We're not pioneers anymore, Dad, Jack Toby says. Paul Kersey says, what are we, Jack? Jack Toby says, what do you mean? Paul Kersey says, I mean, if we're not pioneers, what have we become? What do you call people who, when they're faced with a condition of fear, do nothing about it? They just run and hide? Jack Toby said, civilized. And Paul Kersey said, no. There is a right to self-defense. Actresses Olympia Dukakis, cop at the precinct, and Marcia Jean Kurtz as Marcia Jean Kurtz, woman at the airport, get credited in opening credits only. There's no mention of them in the closing credits. The UK version classified in 2006 by the British Board of Film Classification retained the 18 certificate, but all of the BBFC's previous cuts were waived. This was featured in previous Precious Images. Soundtracks, Death Wish, main title, written and performed by Herbie Hancock. What a great soundtrack this has. Dark, disturbing film from the great Michael Weiner. All right. Here's the feature review on IMDb. This one's by Chihan Furkan, dated February 14th, 2009. Giving it an 8 out of 10, a little lower than mine, but higher than the average. The title of the review is How Michael Weiner and His Death Wish Changed the Outlook of the Crime Genre. One of the best favorite action movies of all time, Death Wish, glitters Charles Bronson's glory famously, followed by 4 script-free episodes. The first episode had inspired millions worldwide. At present, 2009, while the remake version is being filmed, I have to say that no matter who will perform Paul Kersey for the second time, he won't be able to impress us as Bronson did. Rather than Bronson's performance, Death Wish has significant themes and screenplay components which were used at almost every action crime movie later on, thus became cliches of their genre. Spending a lot of running time through the bad guy's side is the most fundamental component. This development was so modern and original, after a while it changed the outlook of the crime genre. Death Wish is nearly as good as Eastwood's Dirty Harry, with a different taste. Obviously, this should have been produced only once, since the sequels misrepresented its purpose. I don't know. Death Wish 4 was pretty awesome. Even better than the original, in my opinion. This person has objections to the sequels. All right, so I've got about 8 movies to look up. Death Wish, The Face of Death. That's Death Wish 2. No. Death Wish 2 is a different movie. All right, I'm going to have to look that one up along with the other 8 movies that I mentioned. That's the review, but I will spend a little time going down the pike, as it is a Monday night. There's no sign of Karate Man in the chat room. I guess he forgot that I did Monday night reviews, because he's way late to the game here. I'm like 47 minutes into this video, and no sign of Karate Man anywhere. Speaking of Karate Man, I've got another one of his recommendations now at the top of my list that I'm deleting. Death Wish. I'm done with the series, although there is a Death Wish, The Face of Death, that I never heard about, that I've got to look into. I may have already reviewed it and forgotten about it, but I'll double check when I get the chance. Come on, open. I should have had it open beforehand, which is what I normally do with my movie list. Why does it say pop-up blocked? Oh, my computer's going crazy tonight. Now I'm up over 48 minutes. Okay. We can do this. Here's my movies list. Number 1 is Knockoff, 1998. followed by Make-A-Wish, 1937. Another movie with the word wish. And Kickboxer 2, 1991 is number 3 on my list. So we'll look up some of those other tangential movies that I mentioned, add it to my list. Thank you for the recommendation, Karate Man. And I'll work on Knockoff tomorrow if I have time. I've got a doctor's appointment in the morning. I don't have to be work until 1, but I'll probably get there at 12, drink some coffee, and maybe take a little nap before I go back to my battle station at work tomorrow. So that should be fun. We'll check out some Jean-Claude Van Damme. The Jean-Claude Van Damme School of Acting, which is also the Lee Majors School of Acting. And maybe a couple others. They kind of evolved into different actors over the years. The kind of wooden acting that we like on this channel, especially Barbara Bain from Space 1999. Even Martin Landau has some wooden acting moments in that one. Who was Barbara Bain's husband at the time. Well, that's the end of my review. Hopefully I covered the bases with Death Wish. I think I beat it to death. No pun intended. Laters.